Hello, everybody. My name is Martijn Loffers. I'm Chief Technical Officer of Supply Chain Media. You might also know me as Editor-in-Chief of the European quarterly called Supply Chain Movement. We have a great webinar coming up about supply chain visibility and collaboration. And with me, I have some great co-presenters. You see me on the left. So my name is Martijn Loffers. I'm Chief Technical Officer of Supply Chain Media. And with me, I have three other speakers during this webinar. First, I have Marjolein Kuipers from PwC. Welcome, and you also have experience. You used to work at Chiquita some time ago, so welcome, Marjolein.
Yeah, thank you.
And next, I have Tony Player. He's from Anaplan, and he's very experienced, and he's the lead in supply chain planning within Anaplan. So welcome, Tony.
Thanks, Martin. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Yes, and last but not least, I have Bert Appels, also from PwC Belgium, and he is a supply chain consultant in operations, and he has also some experience as a raw material planner within PepsiCo, so he knows what it is all about planning. So Bert, sorry, welcome.
Good morning, Martin. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay, so some things before we kick off. This webinar will be recorded, so you can rewatch it later on, or can send forward this recording. The audience is all on mute, but you are able to ask questions during this session. So you will see on the right side a questions pane and panel where you can put in questions. And if these questions are in line of the conversation, we will ask these questions immediately. If not, we have some time at the end for the Q&A, so then we can manage these questions. All right, and we have also some other data at the end for further reading, and also this presentation will be made available as a PDF next week. Okay, so first to kick off, why this topic, supply chain visibility and collaboration? So we did a study in March among 142 manufacturing companies, and what we see, and it's highlighted in red, there's a lack of visibility both on the supplier side and on the customer side, so on the demand side and the supply side. So that's quite unique when you compare to 2011 with the tsunami. There was basically a lack of visibility on the supply side, and it was only impacting automotive and high tech. Whereas what we see in COVID-19, it's impacting both on demand and supply side, and it's actually impacting all kinds of industries all around the world. So that makes COVID-19 very unique. Another thing is what we did. We did research recently after the peak of the European Corona crisis. We did a research on investment plans in software and technology, and as you can see, sales and operations planning is on top, and we'll discuss it later on. And end-to-end supply chain visibility is the next one as a high impact of investments in the coming months, according to over 100 manufacturing companies in Europe. So, but with the interesting thing is S&OP and visibility are related, and so what we see is, we can discuss it in this webinar about both subjects. All right, Marjolein, what is the need for visibility and how things have changed? Could you relate to that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think with this crisis, COVID-19 crisis, it's affecting almost every supply chain, and we see very sudden peaks and drops in demand on one hand side, and on the other hand side, supply that is being disrupted, and also the necessity to quickly ramp up your supply when it's necessary and when the market is picking up. And in that case, I think it's all about visibility and the speed of decision making, whereas what you see on the left-hand side here, the traditional supply chain, where it's all sequential and people are passing on information from one node to another, that is obviously way too slow. It can take days, maybe sometimes even weeks before information is passed on. And the tools of today actually allow us to improve that massively. And in that case, it's all about creating visibility on the information that is floating around, and creating a supply chain ecosystem that allows you to connect plans of, for example, your customers or your salespeople to your distributions, to your suppliers, and your manufacturing. Connect all these plans together, synchronize what you're doing. And the idea is then that when you react fast and efficiently, these kind of disruptions, as we see today, are not necessarily disrupting. It can allow you to take advantage and enforce even your market position.
Okay, and you know, this is about the ecosystem. How about planning? How does it affect the supply chain planning?
Well, if we focus on planning, we start by removing the silos. We connect the different plans. For example, here, as you can see within supply chain planning, you connect your supplier, your customer plans, your demand plans, all the way up to your supply plans, and you collaborate amongst the functions in your company. And this, of course, doesn't only need to be in terms of volumes, but also to be connected to your financial planning in terms of revenue and costs.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, I think it's important to connect your strategic plans, your tactical plans, which we often see as the SNOP, and connect this also to the operational planning and the execution and the ability to react fast when you see something is happening in the market, in your supply and so on. You're able to react and adjust your plans as you go.
You know, when we did a survey in March about how companies were responding to COVID-19, we saw that they did a lot of things assessing the supply chain on a tactical and operational level. But only a few supply chain executives were mentioning that they also were looking on a strategic side on financial impacts. Did you see the same?
Yeah, we see the same because a lot of companies are struggling to translate their volume plans into value, which is something that is crucial. But in order to be able to all talk the same language and not get a siloed supply chain function, we need to tie into sales people that think in euros and in margins, and into financial people as well. So you need to be connected, yeah.
And you know, I can imagine that all things are changing with the demand data, with your point of sale data. How does that fit in this picture?
Well, it needs to be connected all. So you need to be able to translate your demand over your network, all the dots in your network, all the way up to your supply. Yeah,
right. So Tony, you had also experienced some customer cases in the US. Can you relate to that? Tony? Otherwise, no. Okay. Maybe, you know, Marjolein, could you explain what are the benefits of connected planning? And then we get back later on with Tony.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that we see that investments pay off. We see if you do it well, if you digitize your supply chain and connect the different plans, you're able to better serve your customers. You're better able to, what we typically do in SNOP, balance your supply and your demand. So serving the customers, improving the product mix, and also take into account margin optimization when serving customers. And for example, when you have limited supply, the ability to serve the highest margin customers and products. On the cost side, it's all about reducing the impact of unexpected changes and changeovers, expedite costs, and so on. So smoothen your supply chain, being able to predict. And then, of course, this all results in less buffers, which is most of the time lead time buffers or inventory. So it's all on revenue, on cost, and also your working capital optimization.
And what do you see right now companies are doing in this COVID area or post-COVID area? What is their focus on right now?
But you have two types of things. A lot of companies are in survival mode and trying to manage the sudden drops and sudden peaks in demand and being able to supply that. I think a lot of other companies are also looking into what the opportunities are, what they can do with this new situation, and they benefit from it by developing new business models, changing the type of products they supply, and so on.
But then also I can see that a lot of companies are looking for cash, to say, okay, where can make money, because that's also crucial right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Cash is essential in these times to safeguard your liquidity, make sure you can still pay your suppliers, and so on. So that's a key question that we receive at PwC as well, how we can install visibility in a sort of supply chain control tower solution, create visibility on cash coming in, going out, and how to better control that.
Yeah. So in essence, supply chain people should be more talking in financial terms, in cost and revenue and even cash.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all tied together, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Could you give them some examples of some use cases what you have done recently in this matter?
Yeah, we prepared for this webinar a use case, and my colleague Bert will show a demo in Anaplan later on. Mm-hmm. So the use case that we wanted to show you is actually from a pharmaceutical company that sells OTC products. So, for example, painkillers, sunscreen, and so on. So they sell it to pharmacies, and in this case, they had a very extensive network of local warehouses and pharmacies all over Europe, with local entities in every country. And on the other hand side, they had suppliers spread over Europe as well. And the link between these local warehouses and the requirements they had in terms of products and volumes, it was not connected to the planning of the suppliers, which led to the fact that the suppliers actually imposed very long lead times and very high MOQs. And this created very big inventories in the company, and they approached us to request how to become more agile, being better able to respond to changes in the market and reduce, of course, the inventories.
Yeah.
So that's why we created. If you maybe can go to the next one.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So that's why we created actually a sort of some supply chain control tower solution. We jointly designed new planning concepts where we had a central planner that had a visibility over the end-to-end network, coming from the demand planning side, the forecast information from all the different markets, and then also have the visibility on the capacity on the manufacturing side, and the inventories, of course, in the entire network. And by creating this visibility, we were able to bundle orders, to consolidate orders, to actually spread more the minimum order quantities that were imposed by the suppliers, and to better balance actually the supply and demand sides, which gave us a better bargaining position towards the suppliers, and helped us also reduce lead times and plan jointly the supply chain. And I think that the biggest benefit was also that we created the ability to run what-if scenarios, which is something that companies often really struggle with, and is in terms of today, the situation of today is a massive benefit. If you can try to predict what the impact will be of peaks in demand, drops in demand, and so on, if you can play with that, and if you can prepare yourself better for the future, obviously that gives you benefits and it pays off.
Yeah. What we saw in the past, 5 to 10 years ago, we were also talking about control towers, but basically when you look into the market and within companies, they were functional control towers. You had a logistic control tower, you had a procurement control tower, whereas now, based on the available technology in the cloud, you have more horizontal control towers, E2E, end-to-end. So not only internally, so with the functional silos internally, but also beyond that with your suppliers and your customers. Mm-hmm. And that's a change compared to the past. Tony, you want to comment on right now or later on? because you had some examples also from the US, from Anaplan, you know, how you can also tie in your suppliers and your customers in this environment.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, we had a really good experience with a global beverage company in North America who changed their model. Previously, they had one monolithic bottling operation, which was also responsible for commercialization and innovation. And they, for reasons of driving change and growth in the organization, they actually divested the bottling operation and engaged with 68 different bottling entities, many of them multi-billion companies in their own right. And by using the Anaplan platform, they were able to drive that change very fast and to engage in a truly collaborative process with the bottling organizations, and bi-directional. You know, we often talk about, you know, understanding the supply chain planning, revenue terms, for example, but we also need to understand the revenue plans in supply chain terms. So I think that connected planning works both ways.
Okay, cool. Marjolein, why Anaplan as a platform for connected planning?
Well, there are a lot of benefits we see in Anaplan. I think mainly it's the agility and the speed of implementation. It's very easy to develop a use case, a proof of concept in a matter of weeks, and start gaining the first benefits of the platform. Maybe for the audience that are not familiar with Anaplan, Anaplan is actually a cloud-based tool that allows you to model any planning process you want. So it's not coming as a pre-boxed solutions where you buy modules and so on. It's really absolutely flexible, and it allows you to develop something that is completely in line with your own processes. And that is scalable. You can develop one use case, but then if you're enthusiastic about it, you can extend, and this way you can start connecting different plans to each other, like your demand plan to your supply plan and so on.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, you know, when I saw first time Anaplan, the application, you know, it's like, you know, you looking at the Excel, and normally you have a lot of knowledge based in the Excel. You have created algorithms for yourself, you programmed it, but it's hard to share with a colleague. But basically Anaplan had made sure that all the knowledge you have, you know, developed in an Excel, it will be visible and more robust. So you can even see, like in a comic book with a cloud, explaining what this cell in Excel is doing. So everybody else, other planners or controllers or whatever, using this application can see what's the inherent knowledge you have gained and provided and developed within an Excel. So Anaplan is basically a way more flexible tool and more robust, way more robust than Excel, because you know what's underneath and what you have done. So you know, you can swap and finally get rid of all your Excels, but still remain untouched and regain all the knowledge what you have developed in Excel.
Yeah, indeed. It takes the benefits from Excel, the flexibility, and the ability to make something new ad hoc. And for example, if the COVID-19 hits you, you're able to make new dashboards, new models if you need to very quickly. But you get rid of the disadvantages of Excel, like being offline, the many manual errors that we see, and multiple versions, these kind of things.
Yep. Other things to mention why Anaplan is interesting before we go to the demo?
No, I propose we give the word to Bert. He can easily explain and show all the benefits, and then we can continue from there.
Yeah, okay. So Bert, I'll give you the control. So show me the demo, and then you know, we'll see how it works.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Martijn.
You can take control now. Yeah. Here you are.
Yes. Can you see the demo? The screen? No, not yet.
Not yet. You have to pop up here. Yeah, now we can. Yes, yeah. Thanks.
Here it is. Perfect.
So this is live.
This is live. Yes, this is live.
Okay.
So we're going to look at how Anaplan and PwC can, for example, support supply chain professionals in creating that end-to-end supply chain visibility that we just talked about. We already said how important this is to create a competitive advantage, especially in this COVID-19 period. And then many companies are faced with some serious challenges in the area of supply chain. We already touched upon uncertain and fluctuating demand for their product and services, uncertainty around the supply of raw materials or distribution of finished goods and so on. And a lot of companies today are struggling with these challenges, and they are looking for better ways to make informed and timely decisions. And Anaplan can really provide those insights and those flexibility like we already discussed. So the model you see here, this is the landing page of the model. We are showing our PwC's sales and operations planning model based on the pharmaceutical case that Marjolein already touched upon. Mm-hmm. So why do we show this model? Basically, also Martijn already discussed why S&OP is so important and so high on the agenda of many companies today. It's a tactical planning process. It involves a lot of stakeholders. It's really critical in these uncertain times. So what I want to show you is briefly the main functionalities, but especially those that can be useful in COVID period to make you familiar a little bit with what Anaplan looks and feels like and what it can do. But Tony will come back later on how a model such as this one, because S&OP is a very specific application, how this can fit into your connected planning story. So you see the landing page is typically structured according to the 5 steps in the S&OP process: your product review, your demand review, where you gather input from your planners, your salespeople into a consensus demand plan. You do the same logic for a supply review, to build a consensus supply plan. You bring it all together, you balance your demand and supply in your pre-S&OP, and finally you have a management review or an executive summary. So I want to show you some COVID dashboards that we've built, and for your information, these additional dashboards can be built, designed and rolled out in the whole company in a matter of days and more than just weeks or months that a normal IT implementation would take. So, and for me, that is maybe one of the most important advantages of Anaplan. It's the fact that it's a flexible and business-owned planning environment. So the first dashboard I want to show you is the COVID demand impact, because one of the most powerful functionalities of this model is the ability for the user to easily set up new demand scenarios and compare them with other demand scenarios in very clear visuals. So normally the user can easily create a new demand scenario, they give it a name, they feed it with some data. For the sake of time, I've already done this now. So I created 2 new demand scenarios: COVID demand best case, COVID demand worst case. Mm-hmm. For example, in our pharmaceutical company case, the company was based in Belgium. COVID hit mid-March in the country. The country is in lockdown, and suddenly all the previous forecasts that they have made can be thrown in the trash. So for the pharmaceutical company specifically, for example, a lot of their in Belgium, the non-urgent medical visits were prohibited. So the sales of their prescribed drugs would be far lower than what they first anticipated. So our best case COVID scenario, the light blue line you can see here, it really shows a decline in sales compared to the original forecasts. And the worst case scenario says, okay, the lockdown is even harsher. There's a second wave, the lockdown continues, and then sales is even drops lower. So you can immediately see what this would mean for demand and for your revenue, of course, as well. But we also added some KPIs that are very strong eye catchers immediately when you see the dashboard, when they immediately compare your original revenue with your new best case COVID scenario and your worst case COVID scenario. Anaplan also allows the user to very easily play with hierarchies in the model. For example, what you see here, all the visuals are based on the consensus demand plan of all our products and all our sales regions. But we can say, for example, what will our product group P5 do? And you immediately see that everything on the dashboard, all the elements, they change. Same for the sales regions. So we see, okay, let's only look at the C5 product group in Belgium, and you can immediately see the changes. So that is very, very easily done and very strong calculation power from Anaplan.
I got a question from the audience. How do you collect the data to feed the dashboards?
Several options. There can be fed in with flat files, but also be linked directly to your ERP systems or build automatic interfaces. So it's very flexible and depends case on case what you want to do. But there are a lot of options.
But it's easy to do.
It's very easy to do. In essence, it's very easy to do. Can do it automatically if it's regular updates. If it's a one-time data feed, you can do it with flat files. So once it's set up, it's very easy to do. Okay. We also added some managed by exceptions elements on the dashboard because, for example, what we see salespeople in these uncertain times, they want to focus their attention on the most pressing issues. So for example, a salesperson wants to see which of my clients deviate most from our forecast, and they can then take specific action. For supply chain planners, on the other hand, you see the grid on the right. There, they are more interested in what are the largest forecast deviations per product. So how can we take action? What are the issues that we need to focus on first? You can also add grids with some formatting that you can see what is our forecast accuracy, how is it evolving? And for example, here in mid-March 2020, COVID hits and all the forecasts are ruined, of course.
Yes.
So then they can take a specific action on where the problem would be and see it immediately.
I got another question from the audience. Is it possible to connect Anaplan to multiple resources via EDI, for example?
Maybe Tony can help me with that. You can definitely do it with different sources. In the case, so we are business consultants. Typically, what we do is Anaplan takes over the technical connecting with different data sources, and the business consultants, they help with the implementation on the business processes and so on. So maybe Tony, you can help me with this one more specifically because with your background.
The fundamental point is the process should drive the integration. So if we have something which needs to happen on a frequent and regular basis within a day, then certainly we can use a more advanced technique. If it's something where we're bringing in data weekly or monthly, then we can do things in a more simple way. There's a range of technical options from Anaplan, from ad hoc, user-driven import and export, right through to REST APIs for direct connection to multiple data sources. We expect we will touch 6, 8, 20, maybe 50 data sources in the course of a planning cycle. So absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Let me go back then. Oh, sorry. So remember, we talked about the impact of COVID on both demand and supply. So the demand part we just covered. For the supply part, we typically see two main areas in which disruptions can occur. So we have first the capacity area and the distribution area. Again, I prepared two scenarios, capacity scenarios. So for example, there are two plants in our pharmaceutical company that can lose capacity in their plants because there are some social distancing rules that they need to comply with, where they can have, for example, so many employees per square meter. And then you see in red here, what I prepared is that in April, they saw that their capacity significantly dropped. You see a gradual increase of their capacity again in the later months, but still because of the social distancing rules, it's still lower than what we first anticipated. Next to capacity, there also might be some disruptions in the distribution. We have here a COVID lockdown scenario created, where the border between, for example, the Netherlands and Germany is closed, and our products that need to go to our DC in Amsterdam can no longer be supplied by our plant in Frankfurt. So our model has to cope with that. But I think, so what we just described are the different sub-scenarios, so demand scenarios, capacity scenarios, distribution scenarios. But what is very powerful in the model that we created is the ability to create master scenarios, where we combine actually the different sub-scenarios. So here you see I created COVID best case, COVID worst case, that is based on our COVID demand best case scenario, then the capacity and distribution scenario of COVID that we just showed. And same for the worst case, or worst case demand with capacity and distribution.
I got another interesting question from the audience. Yeah. For financial, does Anaplan also reflect the impact of COVID-19 on price?
So actually, we'll talk in a little while about all of the connected use cases in other functional areas, and this is actually a key point for Anaplan. We have very strong background in financial planning, including pricing, price sensitivity, and so on. So yes.
Yeah, you could connect it, I would say.
You could, and in some cases that's going to drive things like allocation decisions. So we would need to keep abreast of movements in prices or proposed change in prices. That could help us in our value-based decision about what a supply chain organization does.
Yeah. Okay. Bert, more to show?
Well, just to show here that the different sub-scenarios create like a master scenario that defines your production planning, because it defines your requirements and your capacity and so on. And you can easily compare them here. There's one more thing I want to show you. Is that's our executive board dashboard, basically addressed to executives and upper management who immediately want to see what is the outcome of our scenario analysis, what are the most feasible scenarios, and how can we compare them and evaluate them. So here we've put the three most feasible scenarios next to each other. You can, for example, in the graph, you can only show those things that you want to see. Executives can immediately see what is our financial impact. So here in the waterfalls, everything is connected. So every change that somebody makes, could be a planner, could be salespeople, could be finance people, whoever, will immediately be reflected for everybody and to see who uses this dashboard. Also, you can play again with the hierarchies, show the financial impact for one product. So that's very, very nice to see. You can also add some KPIs. Typically for supply chain management, we want to see what is our average inventory value or expected inventory value over the next 12 months. Also, what is our expected lost sales? Also very important KPI, of course. Yeah. Here, for example, you see originally we had some lost sales because of capacity issues, but in our best case COVID scenario, we have a lot of lost sales because our demand decreases a little bit, but our capacity decreases drastically. In our worst case, then you see, okay, lost sales, there are not many lost sales because our capacity is decreased, but our demand is also much lower. But of course, our net profit is lower than what is anticipated. So maybe to conclude, what can such a model do is gather input from demand stakeholders to bring it to a consensus supply plan and a balancing exercise. And the scenario analysis we just showed could help clients make informed decisions. Okay, cool. Maybe this model, to give the users some background who are not familiar with Anaplan, this model is created, for example, by us now, so business consultants, which also shows that you don't need to have high-level IT skills or programming skills to be a model builder in Anaplan. It's very intuitive, it's very flexible. So that's also why business people really love it, because you can do it yourself.
But you have to have supply chain knowledge.
Well, if it's a supply chain model, then that is highly recommended, I would say.
Yeah, right. Everybody can use Excel, but this is something different. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah. No problem.
Okay, now you have to give it my...
Yes.
All right. So we have seen the demo. Maybe Tony, you can explain some more about the setup of what is connected planning. How do you connect all the different environments?
Yes, thank you, Martin. I hope you can hear me well. There is some background noise here, so I
No, I
apologize.
can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. So what we see on the screen is an example of the kind of planning activities which would happen in this case, for example, in a CPG company which is making and distributing its own products, which is engaged in some promotional activities, and which is trying to stitch all those things together. And all of these things happen many of these things happen in any organization, but generally speaking, lots of them happen in isolation from each other. For example, we talk about the promotions and the significant impact they may have on demand, but very often in an S&OP cycle, there is no simple way to collect accurate and up-to-date information from marketing or sales on what's actually happening or what's proposed to happen on promotions. And you hear stories about the supply chain guy who only finds out about the latest promotion when he walks in his local store and sees the offer, and then he goes to the office and finds that they have no product to supply the product promotion. So these things are happening all the time. The fundamental principle of Anaplan is, why would we not all work together if we could? Why would we not share information which is impacting other stakeholders and where other stakeholders are impacting me? And I mean that for any part of the organization. Of course, each of these functions have their own priorities and targets and ways of working. They have their own units of measure to talk in, their own planning horizon and levels of detail. So the challenge is to allow them all to do their job in a very effective way, but also to allow them to easily communicate and give visibility to each other.
Could you explain a bit more about what is the different approaches of Anaplan and supply chain, because there are different angles of supply chain?
Yeah, so let's take a look at the next slide, I think, and that will give us a way of talking around that.
So you have supply chain fundamentals, catalyst, and insights.
Yeah. So yes, I don't see your screen right now. Sorry. So you're showing the screen with the supply chain fundamentals and so on. Yeah. Okay. So what we see here is in the top left corner, we see those things that everybody has been doing forever. We do demand planning, we do supply planning, and so on. And often we have a specialist tool or set of tools which does that job very well. But we often don't have the capability to extend beyond that tool and to use it in ways which make sense to other people. How many times have I heard, I go to see a customer, they say, we're trying to use this demand planning tool, we just can't get the sales team to use it. We've given them the 40-page manual that explains what they need to do, but somehow they just can't get it. So these tools are generally designed for specialists to do their job very well. They're not designed with a wide audience in mind. So when we think about these supply chain fundamentals, we need to think how we're going to leverage the work that's gone into those areas and extend into the wider organization. I saw some questions on the question track that asked the question about how do we understand the impact on services that we provide, and not just on the products that we sell. So, for example, we have a customer in Malaysia which runs the electricity generation and distribution network there. They need to know not just the demand for the infrastructure, for the cabling and for the substations and so on. They need to know when the engineers will be available to install and service those things. They often need to know when the software release will change, which is controlling those different facilities. So being able to manage all those things together is crucially important for them. So you see the reference to engineering resource management at the top right of the screen there. And we start to think beyond the fundamentals and start to think about the catalysts, the things which will drive improved performance in our organization for supply chain, but also for our stakeholders and our consumers as well. We think about what do we need in terms of capex, and when will that capex become available, and what impact that will have on our capacity and our efficiencies and so on. So you start to think about a bi-directional conversation between supply chain and other parts of the organization. And having done that work to implement the basics, the fundamentals, and to drive forward with the catalyst, for example, we start to think about what insights we can gain. We've made a massive investment in data, process, and solutions. What more can we get out of that? And that's when we start thinking about liaising with our procurement colleagues, for example. What information can we give them? How can we benefit from analysis of the wider market, of the movement of commodity prices, for example? What can we do to think about the portfolio of products that we offer and the cost and the the profits coming from those and think about driving a conversation to rationalize that portfolio of products. And so, you see a list of examples on the screen of different use cases which could be in themselves useful, but together are much more impactful.
Yeah, could you give an example from a customer of yours how they expand on using Anaplan and how?
Sure. Yeah. Let's look at the next slide, which is the global beverage company, which I mentioned previously. Now, the first engagement with them was about new product innovation and collaboration with external suppliers, with bottlers. As I said, nearly 70 different entities. It happened very quickly. It was largely driven by the commercial organisation, as you can see from the colour coding. But of course, that had significant impacts on the supply chain organisation. And what's happened over time is, as my colleagues from PwC have already mentioned, once you get an appetite for Anaplan, you will find that it organically grows within your organisation. They came as a candidate to a user conference in 2017. They came back to the user conference and spoke about this first use case with such enthusiasm in 2018. When they came back to the next user conference in 2019, they told us about other projects that they had rolled out. We did not even know how they were expanding their use of the solution. They drove that innovation and that growth of the solution. And that's a very common case in Anaplan. We put the power in the hands of the customer, of the business user, who can decide what their priorities are and expand their use accordingly. I'd say one interesting point is they're now at the point where they're doing inventory optimization for spare parts for vending machines. So that's a very, very detailed, extremely high scale in terms of data volumes and granularity and so on, which they have achieved, with minimal resources from inside the organization.
I have a question related to this. Does Anaplan have a kind of solutioner, optimizer to recalculate scenarios and see the impact on turnover, finance, etc.?
It does, yeah. So we can talk about analytics in various terms, in terms of descriptive, prescriptive, predictive, and so on. So there's a full range of analytics available in Anaplan, and we can bring optimization technology to bear. So there's a Gurobi optimizer fully embedded into the Anaplan solution, which people use for a wide variety of use cases. Traditional stuff, optimize supply planning, more unconventional things. Decide on the optimized way to spend our CapEx budget this year. Decide on how to spend our trade marketing budget over this year.
Okay, but it's interesting to see this slide with the expansion of the honeycomb, how a company is expanding all the planning tools over time. So not in a big bang, but also related to the different functional areas like commercial, supply chain, and finance. So I think analytics is only useful if you are ready for it. Otherwise you have to have your SNP in place before you go into prescriptive analytics.
It's true, and also you will find within your organization there is variable degrees of readiness, variable degrees of maturity. Some places we have the data, we have the appetite and resources, we have the sophistication where we can make extensive use of those things. In other places, a more simple, straightforward approach will be better for now, and over time, as they mature, then we can expand the portfolio of offerings there. And I think that's a very important story in Anaplan, is the ability to have a standard model which is adaptable within a framework. We've spoken so far today about the similarity to Excel, and of course the ease of use, the flexibility, that's like Excel. But this is an enterprise solution. We can't have a free-for-all. We need control. We need rigor. So we need to allow people to do things within agreed boundaries. I think the next example is actually another good story about the expansion of Anaplan over time. This time we can actually name names. So this example, we're talking about Tata Steel. So Tata Steel, very traditional industry, very capital intensive. In their world, historically, you made what you could. You ran the plants and the mills at the maximum capacity, and then you tried to sell the stuff you made, because it was all about overhead absorption and making efficient use of capital employed. But this organization, Tata, changed over a number of years their attitude. They realigned themselves to be more oriented towards the market needs, and Anaplan was an enabler to help them to do that thing. So you see this this journey that they've been on, this range of use cases they've engaged over time, again, largely on their own volition. They had the skills, they had the internal process knowledge. As you said before, you need to know about supply chain, you need to know about the functional area you're working in, and then you can make use of it to facilitate your planning process. I did see another question on the list which said, is Anaplan like SharePoint or Microsoft Teams? It's a bit like those things, but what's important is we can plan, we can make decisions, we can record those decisions, including the assumptions in words, and then we can monitor that over time. So it's not just looking back, it's looking forwards, considering what alternative outcomes there might be, and then monitor our progress as we go through those things. So fundamentally, it's about decision making and visibility.
Yeah, but SharePoint is more like knowledge sharing. The name already said SharePoint, where Anaplan is connected planning. You already connect existing planning environments, systems, I would say, your ERP systems, WMS, TMS, CRM, etc. Existing systems you connect to the environment of Anaplan. So that's a totally different approach.
Yes, you're quite right. There was another question about how does this work in a manufacture to order environment, and as you're touching on there, depending on the nature of the business, we will need different data sources. We need those systems of record for the order book, for the opportunities that are coming from Salesforce, from the details from the configuration system and so on. We can put all of those things in one place and help people to make informed decisions, to record those decisions with the assumptions. And then we can talk about the quality of the plan, not just the accuracy of the plan, but the quality of the information that's in there and how well we can share it with a wider stakeholder community.
Yeah, and interesting about this honeycomb pictures is, you see the impact or the focus on certain functional areas. So like the red of sales and marketing at the start at Tata Steel is quite interesting to see. And later on, you can connect sales and marketing to supply chain. So by this, you have already commercial on board in a supply chain environment.
Absolutely right. And to be honest, those things already went hand in hand. External purchasing is a key driver about it, and sales planning are key drivers of each other. What the sales plan looks like, what are the resources we need to support that from an external purchasing perspective. We think about downstream impact on supply chain. We got to think about the customers. So having visibility of what the customers want in line with that, very important. We've already touched on the subject of pricing, the price analytics and its impact on demand forecasting. So you think that these things operate independently, but also in pairs and cumulatively as a set of use cases. When you have a phone, great. It would be even better if somebody else had a phone. We could talk to each other. When the whole world's got a phone, that massively expands the usefulness of that thing.
Yeah, and still companies have a fax. A lot of companies still have a fax.
Yeah, that's difficult to integrate with.
Yeah, I know. All right, I have another question. So now we are getting to the Q&A, but I leave this slide on because it's relating to another question I want to ask you, but also to Marjolein and Bert. Traditional supply chain has not been speaking the same language as the CFO, which has limited the impact on the financials. How do we change that approach?
Well, I guess the impact has always been there. We just didn't know what that impact was going to be before it happened. Everything we do is impacting our results. The way we change the approach is, first of all, to acknowledge the need for it, and at a senior level in the organisation, that understanding is almost certainly already there. And then to figure out where we are, where are the gaps. We don't need to come today and replace your entire planning infrastructure. Let's figure out where the pain is and where the gaps are, and let's fill that gap. And then beyond there, we can steadily expand. And of course, to do it, we think you're going to need a tool. We think you're going to need Anaplan, which allows different people to have their own language to speak in, but to also translate between them.
Hey, Marjolein, what is your response?
Yeah, I think the first step is to agree on the assumptions and agree on the translation process to translate volumes into value, and articulate how your processes, like in S&OP, for example, can also help achieve financial goals and objectives. So start agreeing on the assumptions on the basics, and then move into the same direction jointly. connecting your plans, not necessarily aiming for one set of numbers. Just aim for one set of assumptions and make sure you're heading into the same direction. And not don't fight on getting to the same number necessarily.
Yeah. Another question: do you have an experience with logistics or shipping industry next to manufacturing?
It's coming up more and more as a interesting use case. We do have a number of examples. One of the first Anaplan supply chain customers was actually Del Monte, producing fruit and distributing that. So Del Monte using Anaplan in a wide variety of use cases, but also to manage the distribution, deep sea distribution of their product, right through. QVC shopping channel. If you awake in the early hours of the morning, turn on your TV, you'll see some strange stuff for sale on a shopping channel. That network is entirely managed in North America by Anaplan, and right through to Sears. Sears in North America are managing the logistics across their engineer network. So a van stock level, they're managing that network. There are a number of examples.
Yeah, and when I look at the 3PL companies, I know the DSVs, the DHLs of this world, quite well, and they have a plethora of applications, basically coming from their customers in the WMS, TMS, even their own ERP environments. So I really can imagine that these kind of 3PL or even 4PL companies, should look into this environment, how to connect all these different kind of WMSs and TMSs and ERP systems for their customers to get an overview on a meta level, to look at the whole supply chain differently from a 3PL perspective.
Yeah, of course, those organizations are excellent at managing capacity across the network and resource and so on. It becomes, and as you said, they do that even in spite of the fact they have to stitch all these pieces together. We think there's a case for Anaplan now. But recently in the COVID story we're talking about, I was talking to a supermarket customer. They are doing Christmas volumes, or they were doing Christmas volumes every week, and that had not been planned. How do you possibly respond to that? How do you manage on such a short time scale? You use a mobile phone and a piece of paper, and you struggle, or else you have a more responsive technological approach.
Yeah, Marjolein, I have an interesting question. I don't want to name another vendor, but how is it different from an ERP environment?
Well, your ERP is your transactional environment where you record your day-to-day transactions, whereas Anaplan is more looking into tactical planning, forward-looking planning. How are we going to tackle the future and do this in a connected way with all the different functions together?
Yeah.
So the focus is slightly different, and it's not replacing an ERP at all. It comes hand in hand with an ERP.
Yeah, and what I see
is actually slightly different, Martin. The question was about the vendor, not about the product they offered. So there are large ERP vendors who also offer planning solutions, of course, but they are offered with an ERP mentality. I think the flexibility which we can give, the connectiveness between the different functional areas, and even through time, connection between strategic plan, budget, the SNOP and the SNOE. Those are different in Anaplan than those other vendors.
Yeah, and what I also see with a lot of companies, they have multiple ERP instances, maybe from the same vendor or even from different kinds of vendors, because they have a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So they have an ERP instance from a different vendor. So that's a totally different environment. Whereas, what I see with Anaplan, it's kind of a layer on top of the system, the ERP system of your system of record, your orders, to do the actual planning and go beyond that.
And I think the conventional response from an ERP vendor would say, you just need to implement another ERP system across all the others. And then you're talking about, multiple years rather than multiple weeks with Anaplan.
Yeah, or replace it with one ERP instances, but it will take years. Another question is, how does the control tower work for services of demand and not goods? So in this area.
Yeah, I touched on that point in my previous explanation. Yeah, so it's that's a classic example of connected planning. We need to know about the different skills of those resources. We need to know when they're available. They often work in teams, and those teams may be more effective when certain key individuals or key skills are together. So that's quite a complex HR workforce planning use case. Alongside, aligning that with the impact on our project management and the impact on material requirements and so on. But the other thing that comes out of that often is revenue recognition. All of those things together are driving the activities which allow us to have some money. That's a key driver.
But we also saw in the demo by PwC that they have modeled the impact on the workforce and the capacity. So that's also related to in the HR environment. Another question to you both, to Marjolein and Bert and Tony. Are in this environment, are these plans constrained or unconstrained demand and supply plans? So can you do constraint-based planning with Anaplan?
Yeah. If you allow me to go first, it definitely does. And you just need to know what your constraints are, and then model them in Anaplan as well. To explain a bit on that, not necessarily on this question specifically, but in general, you should consider Anaplan as, if you buy license for Anaplan, you buy a box of Lego blocks, and you can build whatever you want. You can look into the pre-built solutions, but you can also build whatever you like and that fits for you. So with the blocks, you can build a house. But if your kids want to play with a dino, you can build a dino. So you can build whatever you like in this solution. So constraint planning, unconstrained planning, linking to other functions and so on.
Yeah, Tony, something to add on that?
Yeah, so I would say it's important to understand we have optimizer technology built into the solution. So yes, technically speaking, yes, you can absolutely do constraint planning, and you can run multiple scenarios to consider alternatives and constrain them in different ways. Right now we have one of our customers makes flu vaccines. They are very, very busy at the moment, as you can imagine. They only have a very short period of time normally to make enough vaccine to distribute around the world, even shorter this year, because they have to get the material out before much ahead of the flu season, because many more people need to be vaccinated this year to kind of reduce the load on the health services in anticipation of the resurgence of COVID.
When you look at the market of supply chain vendors, you see new players coming up. Anaplan is also quite young but expanding rapidly. So a lot of these new players and even the more traditional players are looking into AI and machine learning. So what is Anaplan doing on that area of machine learning and AI, and how can PwC support in that area? Tony, so what is it?
Okay, so
doing on AI and machine learning?
Yeah, right. So there's a very volatile situation in AI and machine learning right now. There's a massive amount of growth in that area. We think it's too early to pick a winner in terms of technology approach. So we think it's better we offer ourselves as a platform as the decision layer for your analytics, and those layers can be made of use of third-party services like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google TensorFlow, and so on. It can be made of your own R, Python, whatever other data science teams you may have, and it can be made of offerings from Anaplan. So we have AI and ML offerings, embedded in the solution, and we think the best way is to bring those things together in one place, increase visibility and understanding, and operationalize that analysis that you've done.
And Marjolein, what's your approach according to PwC regarding AI and machine learning in supply chain?
But it depends on the specific questions that you have. But we have dedicated teams with expertise in these areas, investigating, and as Tony said, investigating in multiple options, multiple solutions, and then usually we use Anaplan as a layer on top. We go out to optimize, to calculate, and then go back in to be able to continue on the collaboration part and the visibility part.
I see way more questions than we can handle during this 60-minute webinar, so some questions will be answered offline. But one thing in the supply chain related area and context, is Anaplan designed based on a score model? That's a question to you, but maybe also to Marjolein.
Yeah, Anaplan takes into account the reference in supply chain, reference in finance, and so on. So it's really based on best practices, but then, as I said, it's fully flexible. So that's why we come in as a PwC. We bring the best practices, the reference models, and combine this with Anaplan to build the best solution for a specific company.
All right. Yeah, we have to wrap up. You know, we are on the hour, and you know, people have other meetings to attend. To wrap up, you know, Tony, do you have a final advice for the audience?
I would say that the attitude from Anaplan is have big ideas, start small, and move fast. So we're ready to support you to address immediate pain, but with a view to a broad scope solution as time goes on.
So Anaplan is also you know, applicable for mid-sized companies, not only the bigger ones.
Yeah, I would say it's actually ideally suited to mid-sized companies because, as Marjolein already said, you don't buy licenses, you buy access to the platform, and you can leverage that investment in so many different ways. The return on investment is enormous.
Okay, Marjolein, something as a final advice to the audience?
Well, I think on our side at Anaplan and PwC, I think we share the same ideas. It's about customer success and making a success for a story of each project that we jointly do to be able to make our customers more successful. I think that is the key for both of us, and a philosophy that we strongly share.
Okay. Well, you know, I would like to wrap up. Thank you very much for all this expertise for the audience to explain what connected planning is, you know, and not only S&OP, but visibility and connect the dots between all the functional silos. You will see here the contact details of the experts from this webinar. And next to that, we also have some extra links for further related content. We have created a checklist about connected planning in supply chain. Supply Chain Media has developed end-to-end supply chain assessment of visibility you can download, and PwC has done a fabulous survey about supply chain ecosystems and the connected and autonomous angle on it. And there are more customer stories about the connected supply chain, so by Anaplan. So with that, you know, this webinar has been recorded, will be made available probably next week. And also the slides will be made available as a PDF, so you can read about this all together. With this, I would like to wrap up and thank, Bert, thank you for the demo. It was quite interesting to see.
Yeah, happy to do.
All right, Marjolein, also thank you from PwC about the frameworks and the examples from practice.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to showcase this.
You're welcome. And Tony, and last to you, thank you for explaining the concept and the honeycombs of all your customers.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Grateful to have the opportunity to talk to everyone. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody, and all the listeners, quite a lot. Thank you for listening in, and maybe I see you next time. Thank you.